There shouldn't be any difference in the fundamental life things that we all should know. And I think that if we were all raised the same, there wouldn't be pay differences. Like we'd all be on the same slate. So maybe I'll switch it to agree.
I actually don't want kids, but if I were to decide to do that, I would want them to grow up in that environment where there's no difference between you two. You don't have like a curfew that she doesn't have or vice versa.
I agree with you, but I also think that we have, like where we are now, we wish there was a perfect world. So we want to raise our kids and say, treat everyone the same. Yes, absolutely you treat everyone the same, but recognize that not everyone believes that way. Like if we teach our boys the responsibility, I just think that there's an awareness that you have to teach boys being men and also girls like becoming women.
So I agree with the first woman. Like when it comes to the fundamental principles and values, as Muslims, we all have the same understanding of that. You know, Tawheed, the oneness of God, powers of faith. As we have in common, we know in common. But as in raising boys and girls, men and women, they have different roles, they have different things they need to learn, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. I think, you know, these questions are put forward in a way as if they're really, really controversial, and they shouldn't be, because there is clear differences between men and women, and that's absolutely fine. Like, it's fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying that. Men need to know how to be men. They need to know the role and the responsibilities that goes the exact same for women. You know, you're trying to be politically correct because, you know, people are so sensitive around this subject, but women too are different, and they need to, you know, learn things that are just for them. The difference between them physically, they need to know it, and they need to know different things. Women need to understand that them walking outside alone at a time that's not appropriate, they are vulnerable. You know, for a man, they won't be so vulnerable, but they have to teach them the responsibility that comes with looking after, you know, the women in their family and things, their duty to their wives, their duty to their children and stuff. So yeah, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's one of those things, like there's basic life skills. Like somebody might say, oh, well, you know, when you look at traditional roles, for example, and this is what I think a lot of the West is kind of, you know, kind of like there's agendas to kind of go against men and women having more traditional roles. So the women staying at home, cooking, cleaning, you know, these are the kind of obvious things that you think of. The man, he's like going out to work and to live in, and when he comes home, his meal's already ready, these kind of things. Like, so these are the kind of obvious things that usually people don't like. But I mean, I know that in the culture that I grew up in, it wasn't exactly like that, but that's kind of the principles that I was brought up on at the same time. But my dad used to do housework, for example. He still does housework. He knows how to cook. All the men in my family know how to cook. You know what I mean? So it's not something that, you know, it's like cooking is a life skill. So there's no reason why a man shouldn't know how to cook. He should, because it's not by default that every man's always going to have a woman around to do these things for him, you know, and he shouldn't expect that, oh, like, yeah, that's, you know, I need that a woman's going to be always available to cook for him, kind of thing. So it makes sense for a man to learn how to cook, because I said it's a life skill. And there's other things, even for a woman as well, like that you should know how to do, because they can be life skills that's going to be like helpful to you. Do you know what I mean? So, and especially I think in the West, like you get into a situation where you are a single woman living by yourself, you will need to do certain things that might have been more traditionally the men in your family do those things. So it's just like having the ability, you know, you don't need to be an expert, but that's where I think that people need to, it's just having the knowledge to be able to do the basic life skills, basically. But then, like you said, with the men, they need to learn their role as men. Like, what is it to like be a man, like in Islam as well? Like, what makes a man like a
Yeah.
good man, you know, what are the qualities of manhood, and the same for the woman, what are the qualities of womanhood as Muslims. And when we look at
Yeah.
the differences, there's not like, it's not anything like majorly different, you know. You do have your main functions, but there's flexibility in it as well.
Yeah.
So within every household, people will do what naturally is more like their abilities, you know. And it's just like, for example, we have like so many different acts of worship in Islam. You know, you have your 5 pillars, but then with Salah, you have extra prayer that you can do. You know, with fasting, you have the sunnah fasting that you can do. So there's always something extra that you can do. And for anybody, and according to their abilities, you can add as much of whatever, you know, different act of worship. It suits your capabilities, like what you find easier, you can, you know, do that more. So you can, you know, you've got opportunity to get more rewards. It's just the same thing. Like there's some men, they really love cooking.
I think it's probably just fair to say that there are some differences between men and women, and you know, when it comes to applying our everyday Islam, you know, there will be slight differences there. And I think it's a shame that even to say this, you know, there'll be so many people like analysing everything we're saying, because they'll be like, you know, looking for the shock factor. But there's no shock factor here. Men and women are different in many ways. And it's not a bad thing, do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think when it comes to the fundamentals of life, of Islam, it's the same for both men and women.
I just wanted to mention, like you were talking about differences between men and women. Like with Islam, I think one of the main differences with men and women, and some could say it's almost been to some extent almost eradicated in the West, because in Islam, we, you know, the men have certain position, and the position, unlike some people might think that position is there in order to make somebody look good or to give somebody power. But in Islam, power or responsibility or position itself, it comes with responsibility. So the more power you may have, or the you know, more position that you might have, that means you have more responsibility. And the reality is, for every family, the burden of responsibility is on the man. The woman, she's the like second in command, you know. So if there isn't a man around, then obviously then that falls onto the woman, which can be hard as well. But
when you said, you know, comes responsibility, but it also comes accountability.
exactly.
And a lot of men would argue that that's a lot of pressure, you know, and probably not worth what some people claim that position to have.
Exactly.
And that's a lot of pressure on duty. You know, there's a lot of stuff that could go wrong, and it really takes hard work, dedication, firmness, and commitment to the people involved, and to his, you know, his God, you know, his purpose. It's a lot, and I think people underestimate that, and it's such a shame, because it's like everybody moves forward with suspicion and blame, and it's just like, relax, you know, we're all trying to live life, and we live life according to Islam, because, you know, if it's looked at with honesty, it all makes sense. It all falls into place. You know, if you have the leadership position firm and sorted, then everything else underneath usually falls into place. But again, it's on that person to make sure everything is working.